Though it's been a few years since I last saw it, I've never forgotten the tree at the Ontario Science Centre. The one indoors, suspended from the ceiling, with its entire root structure stretching to the far corners of the room. Across the years, whenever I have heard talk of the interdependent web, I've been transported back to the museum, to that room, and to that tree, with its upside down underpinnings on display for all to see. It reminds me of Marge Piercy's poem. Connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground. You cannot tell always by looking what is happening. More than half the tree is spread out in the soil under your feet. She goes on to say, as you've just heard, weave real connections, keep tangling and interweaving and taking more in. Such is ever the work before us as Unitarian Universalists. It's what life in our congregations is all about. Yet sometimes we seem more inclined to lean on our first principle, about an individual's inherent worth and dignity, to the detriment of our seventh, that reminds us of the interconnected web to which we owe our lives. Too often it seems we think ourselves free agents, solo acts, living under the illusion of our separateness, when the reality is that our lives and our destinies are bound up with one another and with all of life in this sometimes complicated web of being. In her wonderful book, Grace Eventually, Anne Lamott tells a story about skiing. She explains that she thought her teenage son, Sam, was embarrassed to ski with her because once, while standing next to him and his friend at the bottom of a hill, she fell over for no apparent reason. And the first time they skied together, she skied in a strangely slow, inexorable path for about 30 meters right into the net at the bottom of the slope. You know, the net put there to protect the small children of the ski school. Then, adding insult to injury, she got tangled up in the net like a fish, she said. After that, she and Sam skied separately. But that's not the story. The story is about the time on the chairlift, when she couldn't remember whether the stop she was approaching was the one that she actually wanted. She hesitated just long enough for the chairlift to jerk forward and continue its relentless ascent. And only then did she realize that it had indeed been the right stop after all. But by then, the chairlift and the ground were growing ever farther apart. Even so, in a mild panic, she wriggled to the edge of the seat and jumped, flinging herself, as she said, the way that strong stuntmen fling themselves onto the backs of speeding trains in movies. I was in the air for an eternity before I landed hard, she said, proving the theory of gravity once and for all. And I was still somehow upright on my skis for a moment until I fell over. I do not imagine anyone had seen anything quite like this before. Someone hurtling themselves into outer space with such force and from such a low starting point. I was aware that people were pretending not to have noticed, either out of kindness or mortification, but I am ever my mother's daughter, and so my first impulse was to wave with confidence to the few people who were watching, to wave like a politician campaigning from a rarely used horizontal position. The story ends with Lamont being grateful for not having broken anything, grateful to the ski patrol that had picked her up and took her to a warming hut, but grateful mostly that her son Sam was not there to have witnessed any of it. There was little else, like the fear of embarrassment or shame, to fuel our desire to be alone, to cause us to withdraw, to pull away, to keep us from reaching out. Yet hiding our vulnerabilities does not get us very far or help to build strong communities. If anything, and paradoxically, it is in sharing our vulnerabilities that we are more often to find recognition, understanding, affirmation, and connection. Rather than beating a retreat, if we can withstand the discomfort we can learn that community springs from sharing ourselves in the weak places as well as the strong. Across the years, Bob and I have visited many of the forests of the mighty redwoods and sequoias and Douglas firs that stretch between Northern California and the lower mainland of British Columbia. Each time there has been for me a sacred experience, to be in the presence of trees that have stood for more than 1,000 years. Trees these days that are increasingly at risk because of drought and fire damage made all the worse by climate change. What I was most surprised to learn on an early visit, though, is that these enormous trees, many of which rise more than 100 meters, have root structures that extend only 2 or 3 meters down into the soil. These ancient forests have so far stood the tests of time and the storms and droughts through the centuries because they have stood together. These trees have survived because their roots are intermingled. With their root systems entangled with one another, their destinies have become truly intertwined. And so it is with a community, with a congregation. As Piercy put it, you can't always tell what's happening or that half a tree is spread out in the soil under our feet. But the truth is, of course, that our lives are interconnected more than we may care to concede. At the heart of being human is the truth that we live in covenant with all of life on this planet. And this is especially true in a congregation where we form an intentional community of memory and hope, where we are called to weave real connections, create real nodes, build real houses, to keep tangling and interweaving and taking more in. Now, this effort is at once completely natural and harder than it might seem. So it would be foolish to not admit to the many rocks that lay in the soil, or the stumbling stones that on occasion emerge to the surface, the ones that can impede our reaching out or cut off connection. The sometimes small and sometimes not so small differences that demand that we get over, get around, or get through them if we are to overcome whatever separates us. In the face of this, giving up on community is sometimes the more tempting course. In her essay called Messy, Imperfect, Beloved Community, UU lay leader Layla Ibrahim describes the ups and the downs of her experience in UU community across the years. I have been going to the same church for a very long time, she says. For nearly 30 years, most Sundays I have walked through our beautiful redwood doors. In all those years, I have filled a variety of leadership positions, from teaching Our Whole Lives sexuality curriculum, to being board president, usher coordinator, to canvassed co-chair. And in all of those years, my congregation has had ample opportunity to disappoint me. I am disappointed when people don't think my justice project is the one we should collectively work on. I'm disappointed when people want different music than I do. I'm disappointed that we don't all agree that our children's ministry is the most important priority in the church. I am disappointed that people don't give enough time, talent, or treasure to the church as I do. I am disappointed, well, you get the idea. 2 or 3 times over the years, I have been so disappointed that I seriously questioned remaining in my congregation. On those occasions, I have thought, forget it. I can just stop going to church for a while or forever. But staying away has never helped me through such times. Rather, coming in closer, telling people about my spiritual crisis, listening, sharing, caring, and worshiping have helped me. Because we are not in church to be with people who want to sing the same music or rally for the same cause or attend the same retreats. We are in church to learn to love better. We disagree, we annoy, we flake out on one another, and we worship, we support, we hold, and we affirm one another. There is really only one choice, she says, between imperfect community and no community. For centuries now, we and those who came before us have chosen imperfect community over the alternative. While we often focus on the great figures in our storied past, this living tradition of ours has always been sustained by the people in the pews, the ones making the decision week in and week out, year after year, to reach out even after hurts or disappointments, to deepen their relationships and strengthen their communities by tending to the sacred ties that bind. That's what's made this congregation and so many others little loving laboratories of the human spirit, places where we take up the spiritual practice of being in community, which so often means being pushed and pulled and prodded into unexpected adventures of personal and spiritual growth. We are, as I've often said before, each other's spiritual practice, whether we like it or not. If you have no idea what I'm talking about here, I'm guessing you have yet to serve on a committee or volunteer in some other meaningful way around our first congregation. Yet to work in relationship with someone or several people who see things or say things or do things differently than you would is a spiritual test. The spiritual test that arises in such moments when we have to decide what to do with our frustrations and disappointments, when we have to navigate our differences, and when we have to do so while knowing that our covenants have actually come to mean something and that they hold us to the degree that we uphold them. Over the past few years, it's become increasingly clear that our wider culture is in short supply of the tools that we most need to manage the challenges confronting us in this age. Tools such as tolerance, patience, curiosity, understanding, grace, and forgiveness. I hope your involvement in this community helps you to develop and deploy these tools in your own life on a regular basis. I see this as a significant reason why places such as this are needed, to help us cultivate care and compassion, that we might better contend with the challenges we face in ways that lead on to human flourishing. There is something countercultural about all of this. Our religious tradition has a 500-year history of resistance against the narrow creeds from which we emerged. We are proud of this history, and rightly so. We celebrate the struggle for freedom of thought and expression that was won by the sacrifices of those who went before us. When I have taught coming of age in the past, I've tried to convey to our youth that the great gift of religious liberty they may so easily take for granted has come at a precious price. But I am not sure that they fully appreciate, or if any of us ever can, the fact that we enjoy the shade of trees that we did not plant, and that we drink water from wells that we did not dig. This seems to be an awareness that comes easiest with age, often after we've planted a few seeds or dug some wells ourselves. But as we become ever more aware of the cost paid by those who've gone before us, do our hearts not turn to gratitude? And does not our gratitude then call us to respond in kind, to do our part in our time, to dedicate ourselves to this proverbial forest of which we are a part, that it might serve and sustain generations still to come? In asking these questions about commitment and connection and community, it's worth reminding ourselves what makes this place unique and why we would devote ourselves to its well-being. The theological diversity by which we are known is both our greatest strength and sometimes our greatest challenge. The expansive range of beliefs and perspectives among us can lead to the view that Unitarian Universalists can believe anything we want. This, of course, is not true. Ours is a faith formed in dialogue, in relationship, in community. Though we proudly steer clear of creedal tests, the truth is that claims to conscience made by an individual are usually held in tension with the witness and the affirmation of the wider community. We are called into accountability to our principles and to each other. At times, this can lead to one group or another feeling ostracized or on the outside looking in. A few years ago, in a denominational report on theological diversity, it was noted that among UUs, the Christians feel marginalized, as do the humanist, the neo-pagans, and everyone else in between. This experience was the case for every theological subgroup except, no surprise, for the Buddhist, who have apparently mastered a healthy non-attachment to feeling themselves at the center of things. Our ongoing challenge is finding our way towards unity without uniformity, to learn how to cherish our individuality without retreating into individualism, to find ways to coexist in harmony and common cause without needing to agree about all things. These are not uniquely Unitarian Universalist concerns. They are, of course, also the concerns of all democratic societies in the modern era. But, unlike many other faiths and political states, these are the concerns that are at the core of our spiritual identity. We must learn to cherish the forest as much as the individual trees that give it shape. UU minister Forrest Church, and yes, that was his name, spoke of the world as a vast cathedral. In his writing, he asked us to contemplate the windows. In the cathedral of the world, he said, there are windows beyond number, some long forgotten, covered with many patinas of dust, others revered by millions, the most sacred of shrines. Each in its own way is beautiful. Some are abstract, others representational, some dark and meditative, others bright and dazzling. Each tells a story about the creation of the world, the meaning of history, the purpose of life, the nature of humankind, and the mystery of death. The windows of the cathedral are where the light shines through. The same light shines through all our windows, but each window is different. The windows modify the light, refracting it in various patterns that suggest discrete meanings. Even as one cannot believe usefully in everything, to find meaningful expression, Unitarian Universalism must be modified or refracted through the glass of individual and group experience. He concedes that as with all extended metaphors, this one is imperfect. But I appreciate a later point he makes about this image, that as unsatisfying as it might be, that we might find as unsatisfying as we might find some of the other windows, that the one overarching rule of the entire place is that we do not throw rocks through the windows cherished by others. Or as Franz Kafka once said, you can't take away another's faith without offering them something in return. I agree with that, and so I endeavor to the degree I possibly can to understand what brings meaning into the lives of others, even when I find it personally incomprehensible or even a little offensive. The best tool I have found across the years is to simply share the light that shines through the windows that resonate for me, the ones that speak to the depths of the human experience, the wisdom of the ages, the marvels of science, and the wonders of the natural world. I know that many are committed to their own windows and not particularly interested in mine. And I'm reminded from time to time that others are sometimes baffled by my beliefs and our beliefs, wondering how such a seemingly free and easy faith can be worth all that much. But we who truly hold this faith in our hearts know that that isn't the reality of things. Without any doubt, I believe that Unitarian Universalism is the hardest religion you will ever love, the toughest one to practice. Sure, it takes courage to take vows of poverty, to commit to meditation around the clock, to fast for days, or forego all of life's pleasures for the sake of one's religion. But to live with the theological diversity that is our faith is not for the faint of heart, nor is the task of constructing a faith for oneself from the array of tools and materials this tradition has to offer, to say nothing of what it means to invest deeply in community and live into the power of making and keeping covenants with other people. So as we move through this time of great transition as a congregation, let us continue to build it up with the dedication of our hands and our hearts, reaching out, tending those wondrous webs of being that connect us and keep us, that this might truly be a house of peace for all people, for our own time, and for generations still to come. So may it be.